Well, let me just take this opportunity to welcome you all to the third installment of our European online seminar. This is a bit of a departure. Normally, we have policy based. Hi, Hannah, how are you? We have policy based seminars, and we will continue to do so. But we also are introducing skills based and career development type seminars, which is the first that we're doing today. And we've picked what we hope is a very salient topic to many of you, and that is essentially how to get a job in an EU institution, and importantly, how not to get a job in an EU institution, an equally sort of important part of that equation. And we do have two speakers that we're delighted to have speak today. Again, our other colleague, Martin Westlake, otherwise known as Johannes de Berlaymont, will be joining us soon. In the meantime, I would like to hand over to Hannah, who is also an alum herself of the European. So it's quite special to have you on what is an alumni seminar itself. So Hannah, thank you so much for being here. Of course, you are an alum, but in addition to that, you're also head of office and policy advisor to the MEP Evelyn Regner at the European Parliament. And so you're based in Brussels. And so you yourself have recently made the transition in sort of going from student life into sort of first real foray into the working world. And you've done it quite successfully and you've navigated all of this. And so what we'd like to do is begin to hear a little bit about your personal journey, what influenced you to pursue a life in policy, what was sort of compelling, how did you get in, just sort of your narrative, and then sort of what you would say to people who were in your shoes or are in your shoes that might be looking to make a similar move. So if that's okay, I'll hand it over to you and thank you again.
Yes, so thank you for the invitation. I am sitting in the European Parliament at the moment, and you might hear some noises because I'm not alone. I'm sharing an office, and we're still working because working time is until 6. So apologies for that, but I'm sure it's fine. The micros are pretty good here, and we have good equipment to work with usually. So let's see to start with my CV a tiny bit, and then I mostly would like to give the opportunity for people to ask me questions. Also, because in my CV, you will see a bit that I have quite an extensive experience with several things in things regarding the Brussels bubble, as it is called here. So, from profession, I am indeed a policy advisor and head of office to a member of parliament. That is one of the many options you get in Brussels. What brought me here originally is twofold. So, I studied indeed one of the European programs in history, and I also am a lawyer. So, I originally did 2 degrees, which is something you will encounter a lot in Brussels. In addition to that, I have always been active in politics before studying already during my studies. So that was one of the main reasons why I was interested in getting to Brussels. The other reason is that I met someone during my European term, and there are some people listening in who know this story, I am aware of. Um, who was going to Luxembourg. So I was deciding why shouldn't I try to go to something closer than to my home country and also do something that actually is interesting to me, namely European Union legislation. So specifically from a legal point. So there were two reasons why I ended up in Brussels: a personal one and a curiosity one. And the way I made it to Brussels is with an internship. This is a very common thing you'll hear. I came for 6 months, I came for 5 months, I came for 3 months, and it's been 6 years, 10 years, 30 years. This is a very common story you hear with people here because these starting points of stage, as it is called, so an internship, are very important. They're not always successful, so be warned. There's a lot of people who do an internship who do not end up staying in Brussels for various reasons, but many people do. And I am one of the prime examples. And I'm sure we will hear from the author of this book. I organized it for myself in the EP library in preparation of this. Um, it is mentioned here as well. coming in as an intern is one of the prime ways to get a foot into everything. Where I'm standing now is I have worked in the European Parliament for nearly 6 years for the same member of parliament. I did an internship at the permanent representation of Austria before, so a bit of a different part of the Brussels bubble, but still in the bubble. And I that was how with sending my CV to the office of that MEP, meeting her at several events, introducing myself, talking with her assistants, um, meeting her assistants at Plux after work. Plux is the Place du Luxembourg. It's a famous drinking evening on Thursday. I was able to achieve this first position just before COVID started, and I've been in this one now. And currently, I am also doing the competition. So it's an external competition. We will probably hear from Johannes quite a few things about how all of this works in a moment. Um, there are several types. I'm doing an external one, and I'm very lucky to be able to do one because there are not that many generalist ones at the moment. This is a way to become permanent. As an assistant, I have a position that is linked to the European Parliament. I am working for a specific member of the European Parliament who is elected. And of course, with elections, things can change. And we are attached to the member, meaning that if, in my case, she would not be re-elected for whatever reason, or decides not to run again, decides to take up another position, my job ceases to exist as well with that. So it's a bit precarious in that regard. At the same time, it is actually also a really nice starting point because you do a variety of things. You meet a lot of people. It's not very bureaucratic. It's sometimes very political even. So if you like that, this is a good way to get in. And as I said, I would like to stay on a bit longer. So being aware of this little possibility of my boss maybe not running again, I decided to do a competition. And I did an external competition for the European Parliament specifically. I'm waiting for the results of the last round, which I should have next week. So I hope I made it through. And then we'll try to find a fixed official position in the European Parliament, which is not only because I want to stay permanently, but also because during my time as assistant of this member of parliament, I have been vice president assistant, which is something different again. It's very, very specific. I will not go into the details, but it made me see the administration. So, like the bureaucratic aspects of the European Parliament, of the Commission, of other institutions like the Committee of the Regions, of the Economic Social Committee, that I also had to work with closely because she was responsible for the exchanges with these two other bodies. I saw the amount of people there working there, and so I was interested. And I looked around, what can I do to stay and to do more? And so competition, in order to stay long term, is the thing to do here. I already talked quite a while now, so to give you a bit of an overview, basically, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. I'm also the one in my office as head of office, taking decisions on who gets a stage internship, and I've worked on staff policies over the last 3 years within the European Parliament for my boss as vice president. So I know quite a few things also on the intricacies of career development and all of that stuff. Afterwards, I guess a lot of people here are more interested in how to get in first. So hear my experience for now. I'm happy to listen first of all to my co panelists today, and then also answer any possible questions and ideas that you would like to float.
Great. Thank you, Hannah, so much. Welcome, Johannes. I hope that getting a job in an EU institution is not as difficult as it is to run a Zoom webinar, apparently. So, and I'm sure you're here to disabuse us of any notions of that we may have. Welcome. Really delighted to have you. Just by way of introduction, you write under the name Johannes de Berlaymont, and of course, you've written the book that Hannah has mentioned. working for the EU, How to Get In, which I believe was also re-released with sort of updated information. So excited to hear sort of what has been added to that. But when you're not writing, you have also served as Secretary General of the EU Economic and Social Committee from, I believe, 2008 to 2013, and are currently visiting professor at the LSE and College of Europe in Bruges. So not only a lot of sort of insider knowledge, but also from an academic perspective as well. And we're very excited to sort of hear what you have to say. So I'll hand the floor over to you, and then I wonder if maybe then Hannah, once Johannes is done, if you'd like to sort of share any reflections or comments on what he's presented. And then, of course, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Please do feel free to put any questions into the box, and we'll be monitoring that in due course. So with that, welcome, Martin, and thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm really sorry, Hannah, that you had to go first because of these technical hitches. But in a sense, it was nice. For me, it was confirmation of many of the things that Johannes talks about in his book. Perhaps I could begin with a few words about the book. Why on earth did I write it? It was a hell of a lot of work. And the answer is that I have this conceit. Wherever I work, I like to write something about it. A textbook or an article at least. And I noticed that the Economic and Social Committee, which I had the pleasure of being Secretary General for 5 years, there was no textbook in the English language at least. So I approached my friend, the publisher John Harper, and said, would you mind publishing my textbook about the Economic and Social Committee? And he looked me in the eye and said, you know, Martin, it won't sell many copies. So if I publish your book, will you write me a book about how to get in, working for the EU, how to get in? Because you've worked in all sorts of institutions, you've worked at various levels, you've recruited a lot of people over the years. So I can think of nobody better to write such a book than you. To which I replied, okay, but then I'm not going to use my name because I'm an academic. This isn't an academic study. It would be more a vocational work. And so here we go. So yeah, you can start the show. So that's the book on the European Economic and Social Committee. He was true to his word. And if you click next, that's the first edition of the book, which came out in 2018. And you click again, Dorian, and there is the second edition, spanking new, fresh out of the press. It came out in August of last year. And it's difficult to be very much more up to date than that. Now, I'm not pushing anybody to buy the book necessarily. I will give you the address, the website address of the publisher who gives special offers of various sorts. But if, like Hannah, you can get to a library that has a copy, so much the better. I'm not pushing you to buy it necessarily. Next, please, Dorian. So this basically is the contents of the book. I mean, a lot of these questions seem like straightforward questions, or at least they require straightforward answers. But it's not, in fact, the case. So what is the European Union and what does it do? So it's all sorts of different things. We have this sort of aggregate image of the European Union, but it's a cause, it's a process, it's an economic and commercial force in the world, it's a community of values, it's a model for other forms of integration, and it's a collection or a constellation of different institutions. So it's all sorts of different things. And when I was writing this book, I tried to interview people at various levels in their careers and incorporate what they had to say about how they felt about their career or the institution they worked in or the way they got in. And so there is a section on what it's like to work in the Union, an explanation of why we have a European Union civil service. Fundamentally, it's because it's both a cause and a process. I explain what sorts of jobs are available, how permanent officials are recruited and employed, and I'll come back to that word permanent in a moment, where EU civil servants work, and they're basically, since I joined the European Union, it sounds very odd if I say this, but since I joined in 1985, there has been a massive proliferation, dispersion, and diversification within the European Union. I explain the different sorts of temporary staff and the importance of certain grades within those temporary positions. I explain the other categories. I explain about the importance of getting to Brussels, about the value of a traineeship, as Hannah was explaining. I say something about the philosophical approach that one needs to adopt, especially if aiming for the EPSO, the European Personnel Selection Office open competition way of getting in, because it takes a long time and it's very difficult, very competitive, and you need to have a stoical approach. But I also explain about the other ways of getting in, above all, internal competitions, and I will have a lot more to say about them in a little while. So next, Dorian, and next. So who was I writing the book for? Well, it sounds a bit pompous, but I do believe in the concept of representative bureaucracy. And if one looks at the administrations, let's say, of the European Union, they're doing okay on gender balance, and then indeed they're getting better. They're not doing so well on geographical origin. Some member states in particular are underrepresented in the European institutions. They're not doing at all well on ethnic origin or people with disabilities, frankly speaking, which, if one were to compare on contrast with, say, Canada or New Zealand or even the UK, where their civil services are much more proactive in recruiting from various sectors of society to make sure that they are properly represented. And although there are no statistics on this, they're probably not doing well on things like class-based recruitment or class-based identification. And for me, this is part and parcel of the democratization of the European Union. And so what I try to do with this book, again, it sounds pompous and pretentious, but I've tried to write it for people who are not insiders, who do not have yet the insider knowledge that somebody like Hannah has been developing or somebody like I have, because you're not inside yet. That's the whole point of it. And because you don't have that insider knowledge, I've tried to make sure that you can get it through a book. So a few words, next slide, please, Dorian. A few words to summarize how I see the changes over the years since I arrived. I think there have been massive changes, really. The first is a proliferation of institutions and bodies. When I joined in 1985, there were 4 institutions and 1 advisory body. Now there are 7 institutions and 2 advisory bodies. There has been, we don't have a good word in English for this, there has been a process of what's called agencification in French. There are 6 executive agencies now, and there are 37 decentralized agencies working throughout the EU in pretty much all of the member states. There's been a big expansion of member states and the number of languages that are used. So from 12 in 1985 to 27 now, 9 candidate countries, so 27 and counting. There's been a big variation in job types, a big increase in the variation in job types. When I joined, there were administrators and translators, and that was it. Now there are administrators, contractual agents, temporary agents, detached national experts, diplomats, intérimaires, APAs as they're called, accredited parliamentary assistants. Hannah, is that what you are at the moment?
I am a parliamentary assistant at the moment.
Yeah, an APA. You're an APA, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so all of this jargon is explained in the book as well, by the way. There's been a big evolution in working practices. Frankly speaking, the institutions used to be rather chauvinistic in terms of working hours. They weren't very family friendly, if I can put it like that. But there's been a big revolution there now with developments like teleworking, parental leave. The institutions now are much more, how can I put it, much more family friendly, among other things. Decentralization, not just within the member states. We now have a European External Action Service, which has, I think, 145 delegations throughout the world. You can now, within the EU system, you can be a diplomat and work in one of those or several of those 145 delegations. There's been a distinction since 2004 because of a series of reforms took place there then between selection and recruitment. Now, part of that reform process was the creation of the European Personnel Selection Office. which everybody calls EPSO, which sounds like a gravy powder, but anyway, that's what it's called, EPSO. And what it did basically was it distinguished between selecting young people, not necessarily very young, but younger people who could then be recruited by the institutions. So it made a distinction between the two, which in effect meant that there are two hurdles to be leapt over with the open competition procedure. There's been a massive growth in career paths. It's now possible, for example, to have a career entirely within an executive agency or entirely within a decentralized agency. You don't necessarily need to work anymore in Brussels to be working for the European Union on a longer term basis. And I think it's fair to say that Brussels has become much more like Washington in the sense that now there is much more of an osmosis between the institutions and the wider world. The last point I'll leave over because I'm going to talk about that in my next slide, please, Dorian. So I think a major sea change is probably underway in the way that the European Union and its institutions recruit. Over the years since 2004, so over 20 years ago, the open competition, the generalist open competition, which is the basic way in for people, there's been a breakdown of this approach for various reasons, legal reasons, technical reasons. A big open competition was supposed to be organized this autumn. I believe it's been postponed again. That means it's 4 or 5 years now since the institutions have been able to draw off these lists. But even if there were to be such a list, a recent reform of EPSO means that there is no longer something that they call the assessment center in the jargon. The assessment center was a means for EPSO to examine physically people on their, how can I put it, their soft skills, person-to-person skills, the sorts of skills which are not necessarily evaluated in a written exam, but can only be evaluated through interviews, through interpersonal experiences. And what that EPSO has replaced that by saying that instead of a shorter list, there will now be a much longer list of laureates of these open competitions, where you don't need a PhD to understand that if you're going to stand a chance of getting off a list, getting on the list is already a hurdle, but getting off a list afterwards, you will need to become a known quantity in one way or another for a potential recruiter. As I mentioned in a previous slide, what the institutions have done in the meantime is they have started organizing more or less on a regular basis now what they call internal competitions. So these, as the name suggests, are designed to recruit from people who are already within an institution, whether they're a temporary agent or a contractual agent or an official, by the way, because they're a way of accelerating your promotion from one grade to another, or in the case of the Commission, in some cases, stagiaires, trainees. Once again, the whole point of the internal competition approach is that it recruits precisely known quantities, people who are already working within the institutions and therefore who are known. In both cases, already being in the system in any case is a major advantage. And if I can put it the other way around just to help you, most of the recruitment in the institutions is done by middle managers, heads of unit as we call them in the jargon. Now, if they have a post, a free post on which they can recruit somebody, they can't make a mistake. Such free posts are very rare, so they want to make sure that they get it right. How are they going to get it right? Because they already know the person they're recruiting, either because that person is a former stagiaire, or because they're a temporary agent or a contractual agent or a detached national expert. But in any case, it's somebody that they already know. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, and just if you could go back just a moment. I should also say that necessarily the adoption increasingly by the institutions of this internal competition approach means that they're shifting away from the idealistic interinstitutional approach of 2004 towards much more individualistic individual institutional approaches. So the Parliament is looking for people who want to work in the Parliament. The Commission increasingly is looking for people who want to work in the Commission, and so on. And the confirmation of that, next slide, is that the commissioner, Piotr Serafin, the Polish commissioner who is responsible for human resources, in his letter that he received from Ursula von der Leyen as an incoming commissioner, she wrote, "I would like you to carry out a large-scale review of the Commission's organizations and operations. You will be supported in this work by a high-level reflection group on the future of the Commission civil service." The Commission civil service, not the EU civil service. "And you will make proposals to improve recruitment and talent management to attract and retain a skilled, diverse, versatile, and motivated workforce at all places of employment." And earlier this week, the European Commission appointed Catherine Day, a former Secretary General of the European Commission, as a special advisor and chairperson of this high-level reflection group on the future of the European Commission civil service. What does that mean? In my opinion, I speak as somebody who's been out of the institutions now since 2013, but I've kept in touch. What it means to me is that we're heading back to an individual institutional approach where each institution does its own thing. And I suspect what it means is the abandonment of the generalist EPSO open competition method in favor of more precise internal competitions. So last slide, Dorian. Sorry, I've gone on and on. So my main message is to all of you people out there: get to Brussels if you can. It's like Washington, as I said before. There are loads of jobs to be had here in think tanks, journalism, consultancies, advocacy groups of one sort or another. And try it before you opt for a permanent career in the institutions, assuming you want a permanent career. Try it first. And the only way you can try it is by getting a foot in the door, whether it's through a traineeship or through some sort of temporary position in the institutions. In my opinion, this is my advice: you should maximize your chances and your options. As I said earlier, be philosophical, be stoical about the process. It's highly competitive. There are plenty of very bright young people like Hannah who are sitting various sorts of competitions and trying to get a permanent position. And in my opinion, having worked, as I say, since 1985 till 2013 in the European Union, I would warmly recommend that you should go for it, because it's a wonderful experience. You are taking part, as I said, in a cause and a process. It's an evolutionary process, so you're taking part in history. History is taking place, whether it's enlargement, whether it's something extraordinary like German unification or economic and monetary union. Hannah's probably too young to remember before the euro existed, but this extraordinary achievement of a single currency within the European Union. And I could go on. And those are all experiences that I had in the course of my career. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was fantastic. I think that before we turn over to Q&A, and again, please do put any questions that you have into the box. I'd like to invite Hannah to maybe reflect a little bit on what Johannes shared with us, and if there was anything that you would like to pick up on that maybe resonated particularly with you as you were beginning to navigate this, and then we can open it up for questions. So Hannah, please.
Of course. Well, I can underline everything that has been said. That is very much my experience as well. Would like to add a few things that might be interesting to hear. For example, from the perspective of the institutions doing separate competitions is definitely something I'm seeing very much as well. It has some advantages to a certain extent as well, because, for example, the European Parliament is doing specifically for people with disabilities now for a few years, a positive action program where they only hire people with disabilities, exactly because there is not a lot of them yet in the institution. There is also attempts to change the disbalance in nationalities, of which I'm probably profiting now. I'm Austrian. I'm the second least represented in the European Parliament. So Cyprus, I think it was the Netherlands. Netherlands is the worst, then Austria, then Cyprus, then Malta, then sorry, I'm getting confused here. Luxembourg. Malta is actually very overrepresented in the European Parliament, interestingly enough. It's a bit different than other institutions. So these four currently, so I repeat, Austria, the Netherlands, Cyprus, and Luxembourg, have a specific competition, an external competition for everyone from that nationality, which is completely new because, of course, nationality based is a bit of a questionable choice, many think. There is a lot of court cases going on in this as well, because no one is allowed to discriminate against nationality, especially not the institutions. However, the issue here is that all these four countries have someone who speaks their language. A country that is much bigger. So for Austria, it's Germany. For Cyprus, it's Greece. For Luxembourg, it's France and Germany. So if you want to specifically recruit and fulfill the quota, you're obliged to actually fulfill on a nationality-based level. Doing the language-based ones wasn't enough anymore. So this is the main argument used here. This is what I'm now kind of profiting from as an Austrian, because it gives me a chance of doing an external competition with much less people than what usually would be the case with EPSO. Because at EPSO you have thousands of people. And just to add, the last generalist competition was in 2019, so pre-COVID times. And it has been postponed again since 2023. I think it has been postponed 4 times by now. So the amount of people who will apply for this is going to be really big. I also want to use this as a bit of an encouraging information as well. This is not the first competition I'm doing. I did a specialized lawyer competition, for example. I had no time to study, still made it to the second round. And then at the third round, I didn't manage anymore. I was not good enough to get to the next round. I was also already surprised I made it to that one anyways, because as I said, I didn't study because I had no time. But you just need to keep doing it. So this is essential. It will not work out at the first option. I was very lucky to get my position in a member's office rather quickly, actually. I didn't have any downtime between my internship and the new job, or now not anymore new because it's been more than 5 years. But I know a lot of people who did the internship and then were really doing their best for months and sometimes even longer, and just did not work out. And then at some point, suddenly your CV ends up at on the desk of the correct person. So this is something to take into account a lot. Use the contacts you made if you made it to an internship, and go beyond that as well. Like one example, and he's in the meeting as well. My partner is Dutch. He sent a message to any Dutch speaker he could imagine that was working on the field he was specialized in. And somehow this made his CV go around. And at some point, someone said, "Oh, there might be something. Let's look into this." And in the end, with a competition and tests and him proving that he's actually good, not just his CV, he managed to get a position now. That is a 6-year contract. And here, this is also something you should be aware of. Once you're in, doesn't mean you are actually in forever. There's so many different contracts, like mine, like the 6-year contract, and they're all in the book, for example, but you can also look them up online. It's very different from the experience. But once you're here, you actually know if you really want to do this. I have a lot of colleagues who come to Brussels and then after a year or two, they say, this is not for me. And they go back to the member states. But they go back with the European experience. And I think that alone is already very valuable, because being here, it's what was said as well. It really feels sometimes as you are part of the history that is being made. You really are, especially if you work very close to a member of parliament, but even if you work in administration. I can tell you of a lot of legislation that I negotiated with her or on behalf of her, which sentence I put into the legislation, which one I was able to get through the negotiations, why certain things are there. And I know I made a difference. And that is one of the best motivations you can have to stick to a job like mine, where you have very long working hours. But nearly everyone I know here is super engaged. So this is really one of the positive things. What I would like to add as well a bit is that there are changes in the competition as such as well. It's much less on a meta level of logic applied. It's more. It goes a bit back as well, as already was mentioned, to knowledge on the EU, motivation, and interpersonal skills. And something I've heard a lot, because as I said, as a vice president assistant, my boss was in charge of staff policies in the European Parliament. So I know a lot about the discussions in the background, that a lot of people who were recruited with the old EPSO system, basically, as it is now called already, they don't even know why they work in the European institutions. Like, there's a lack of this motivational aspect. And that's one of the reasons why the institutions want to change the competition. They want to have people who actually really want to run for Europe and the European Union more than what their experience was with here. And it is not always easy if you're in to then continue. You need to be a bit flexible, but best is also to know approximately what you want and what you don't want, I would say. So if you know you like working in policy like I do, so working for a member of parliament, working a bit more politically is something that works really well for me. But if you're not at all that person, then you will not be happy working for a member of parliament. Yet if you do it for a while, it could be a stepping stone, because you will meet people, of course, but it will also in your interview already probably will be noticed that you are not really motivated, and that is something that everyone pays a lot of attention to. So I've heard, for example, now for my competition that I just did, that a lot of people did not explain why they wanted to come to the European Parliament, to work for the European Parliament in their interaction with the recruiters and the selection board, which of course for me, it was the first question I asked myself. Okay, why do I want to change to the administration? Why am I here doing this competition? Why don't I stay with my member? And my main reason is because I think good administration, good public administration, is one of the pillars of democracy, and I want to contribute to that. But if you don't know this answer, you might encounter difficulties into getting a job because your motivation is lacking, and that is something you can feel. And as I said, I'm the one recruiting our stagiaire in the Parliament MEP's offices. If you notice that already, there are 10 other people who are extremely motivated and probably as qualified. So show your motivation and your qualification. I would say is like the main points that I would like to add before going into the questions.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Yes, and there are, yeah, Johannes, please do come in before we hand over. Yes, pick up
Yeah,
on.
it just reminded me, Hannah, what Hannah was saying about motivation reminded me of an important development, I think, in general in the recruitment world and not only in the institutions, and that is the arrival of dreaded artificial intelligence and algorithms. I understand that, for example, because the Commission, for example, receives so many applications for traineeships, that they do use an algorithm to sift through the CVs. And you can easily imagine that one of the things that they tell the algorithms to, I mean, I make them sound like they're beings, but one of the things they will instruct the algorithm to look out for is motivation, for example. So I think it's a very good point that Hannah is making, that you should not forget to state the obvious, which is why you want to work in an institution in the first place, especially if it is an institution which is sensitive about its role and its development, like the Parliament, where really it's had to fight for all of its powers over the years, and it's still, in a sense, a revolutionary institution. So I'm not suggesting you necessarily have to crawl, but it does help to indicate why you want to work for a particular institution if you're applying for a particular institution, as well as for why you want to work for the European Union.
Yeah, just put yourself in the shoes of the people sitting on the other side of the table. They would be your colleagues.
Yeah.
Would you want to be their colleague, and would they think you would be a good colleague for them? I think that's the best tip I got for preparation of the competition. That is extremely important, and it's very difficult to get to this point anyways already. But then the next question now for me is to look which exact job I'm going to do, which is like this selection and recruitment difference. I'm lucky enough that I am in the European Parliament, so I have access to the intranet, so I see positions that are posted internally, but they are posted internally, most of them. And at some point, if you can't fit them internally, they will be posted for external people as well. So it's also in your book, at some point someone said, yeah, the boyfriend of my sister was working and he was in the commission, so he sent me the vacancies. That is extremely important. That's if you know someone and they can look it up for you, it makes a bit of a difference. You just need to be sure that you meet the entry requirements, meaning that you have either the competition selection, you're on the list, or you have passed what is called a cast competition, which is like for the 6-year contracts. There you also have to pass some tests, or you are able to be invited to do them. And then for example, becoming an upper like me, it's a completely different procedure because it's the members choosing. So follow their social media, follow their websites, look what type of people they already have and what they could be needing, and be aware that the absolute maximum they can recruit is 4 people. Officially, sometimes with exceptions, they might do 5 now. It's a new rule in this term, but they probably don't have the money for it because the budget is very limited. I just actually calculated my boss's budget because we wanted to give someone a higher salary in the office. It's very difficult to fit all of that in. But in the end, what you get is a job where you can actually make a difference, a good salary. I have to also say that it's really a good salary, a good insurance, and many other benefits that you can easily look up online. You will find the explanation. Okay, already talking too long again as well. So
No,
happy
no.
to go into the questions.
Well, we've had a lot of questions, and please do keep them. Just type any questions into the Q&A box. I'll be moderating them. I'm going to sort of group a few because we do have a number of them, and some of them, as one might expect, kind of center on similar topics. So 2 that I see quite a bit of is, so one sort of centers on what kind of background one really needs. And so there are a number of people who have written in, Sharon and other anonymous individuals have said, I'm not doing politics, I'm not doing law, I'm completing my degree in this, that, and the other. A, is that going to be a demerit if I try to enter the institution? And B, what are any sort of particular upskilling things that I could pick up to make myself more competitive? That's one. I'll let you both answer that. And then the other one that we're also getting a lot of is there just a very direct sort of portal that people can access to sort of see where they can start looking at opportunities? So whoever would like to sort of take that first, in whichever order.
Well, Hannah, please if I get things wrong, please correct me. The first thing on the portal, yes. There was a specific question about the intern job portal. Yes, all the institutions have such portals. The ones in the Commission and the Parliament are brilliant. They really are very extensive and very informative. And they're a good place to start, by the way. So yes is the answer. And you can easily find them. You know, a simple internet search will throw them up. And they provide, in the Commission's case, it has a frequently answered questions section, which is very detailed and which replies indeed to quite a few of the questions that have been put in the chat here today. So that's for the intern and job portal. For the background, well, you don't have to have a politics background. I think that was one of the specific questions. The recruitment procedure the open competition recruitment procedure tends to favor generalists of one sort or another. But over time, experience can be as important as your academic background in terms of your qualifications. So you don't need to feel intimidated by the fact that, I don't know, that you did a first degree in, let's say, something outlandish like medicine. Because in a sense, if you have come from such a specialization to something more general, then that will catch the eye. Ah, this person has decided that they'd like to work in the European institutions. That shows commitment, that shows genuine interest. At the same time, EPSO, which also has a portal, by the way, and if you're interested, you should definitely sign on because they will send you fairly regular updates on open competitions of one sort or another. It doesn't only run generalist open competitions, it also runs specialized open competitions. Now, the distinction with the one that Hannah's doing is that it's within the European Parliament, but these are open to anybody. But on the other hand, they are very specific. They're things like accountants or chemists or scientists. Atomic scientists was one of the more recent ones. Now, sometimes the specific competitions, open competitions, are borderline generalist. They're not so specialized that you couldn't also apply for them. So keep an eye on those as well. But don't be discouraged by any means if you don't have a politics background or a political science background. And of course, I would say this, wouldn't I? But Johannes goes into quite a bit of detail about all of this. Over to you, Hannah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I fully underline the political part. It's actually sometimes a hindrance, I have to say, even if you're too politically affiliated. You should not put that too much in your CV. You can mention it. You should not leave that out, but better to say working for a political party, not working for political party XYZ. It has been something that people have recommended already to me as well. Languages I would add as well, maybe. You will use English at least a lot. So of course English is key, which I assume everyone in this webinar is very capable of speaking, but it is useful to speak other languages. So French, for example, or German are the two other official languages, but especially smaller language fields are something that are quite researched at the moment too. I would like to add to the medicine aspect. We actually have doctors in the house, like specifically GPs. But I imagine that this would be something that, for example, the directorate that works on health policy would be very interested in. Same, I know one colleague of mine is an anthropologist by academic training, and it's something that I've experienced as well when we look for trainees, but that I've seen a lot. You need to stick out a bit. So I'm a lawyer, which is a very standard thing, but I also did a history degree. I also did a few things on the side, and therefore my CV is not a standard. I did the law degree, I worked in a law firm thing, which already is very good. So this is of course something no one will say don't apply, not at all, but maybe add something that makes you a bit different from a standard lawyer. That could be a specialization you did within the field. That could be some experience you had there, but it also could be that you indeed did another full study in a completely different field, or that you worked for an NGO in Brussels that was not requesting your more legal background, but something else of your experience for the work. So this is certainly something I've seen a lot with people here, that they are usually interested in a lot of things. But then again, yes, we have these very specialized, like atomics chemists or something. I don't remember exactly, but those are very specific. So then, of course, you need to fulfill that special profile. If you're then a lawyer applying for that field, chances of you getting in are very slim, because unless you worked before that on this specific topic, they will not take you because they need specifically this profile. And this is something I'm curious to see also how it develops, because the approach within the houses is that you will change positions after some time. So that's why generalist competitions happen, because you are not stuck for 30 years doing exactly the same job. The idea is that you are capable of changing, and that with changing you bring new insights to the new team you're going to. It doesn't need to be that you then are changing in the hierarchy up for whatever reason, but maybe you're just shifting on the same level. There are people who prefer doing that, because being a manager in one of the institutions is a lot of work. And there are a lot of people who decide, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do the content job. And therefore, I will just remain on that stage. One other tip I would have is you don't have to aim for the institutions directly at first. There's a lot of other places in Brussels. I started, as I said, at the permanent representation of Austria, but there are also NGOs. And I actually think that was really nice for me, because I saw everything a bit from the outside first. So I got a really good overview what there is. And I met a lot of people at the same time. Like, I could do all the networking necessary to then get in. I was already in Brussels. And that brings me to my last point. Some countries, not all of them, but some of the member states have specific departments that try to help people get into the institutions. And they will have also newsletters. They will have training courses. Austria has that. Some other countries like Germany, I think, also do that sometimes. So if you are linked to one of the member states, just try to figure out if there is something, and try to get yourself known to these people as well.
Thank you. I mean, as everyone is aware, the majority of students in the European Consortium will, of course, come from EU institutions, rather EU countries. But we've had an interesting question about both international individuals. So in one case, a gentleman, Tanvir from Pakistan, who's interested in understanding if there is realistic prospects for any non-EU students or citizens to secure employment within institutions, and what that might look like. And then also, as a corollary to that, are there any sort of special pathways for Brits despite Brexit? So would they have different prospects? Are there opportunities? Could you speak to a little bit about individuals who are not residents or citizens of EU countries?
Well, I'm a Brit. I suppose I should answer that one. Although I'm also Belgian now. I think, first of all, I think the institutions collectively behave with great magnanimity towards the British origin officials who are already within the institutions. Thanks, I think, to the lead that was taken by the Secretaries General of the respective institutions. In the case of the Parliament, Klaus Welle, nobody's career has suffered, none of the Brits. There's a British Director General at the moment, Stephen Quest, for Human Resources in the European Commission, to take one example. So I think the institutions really showed that for them, when you become an EU official, you do genuinely become an EU official, even though you may have, a different national origin. But the truth of the matter is that the UK is now a third country. And as such, the answer is the same for the UK in a sense as it is for the Pakistani gentleman. And by the way, between brackets, one of the great privileges of my life was to be able to design and to get through the legislative process a higher education exchange program called Erasmus Mundus. And so I'm absolutely delighted to see it mentioned twice in different questions here today. So that's another example of the things you can do in the European institutions, where I think in a national civil service, you'd be unlikely to be able to do something like that on your own, or pretty much on your own. Anyway, to come back to third country nationals, the opportunities are limited. You can do traineeships in the Commission, I think, but otherwise, a full-time career, no. Of course, what you can do is live and work in Belgium. Johannes explains all of this, or live and work in an EU institution long enough to be able to take out the nationality of that institution. And once you have done that, then you, of course, are eligible to apply to the European Union institutions. In my days in the Economic and Social Committee, I had a wonderful PA who was Colombian in origin, but of course she had become Belgian as well. And I also had a wonderful Congolese lady in my staff at one stage. So that, and I have a good friend, he's American really, but he's of Italian origin, and that enabled him to get a job in DG competition as a lawyer. So that is another way of getting in, but otherwise, frankly speaking, the possibilities are limited. Unless that is, you are a national of a candidate country, in which case there are specific recruitment procedures. The only other possibility is working as a local agent. In the case of the Pakistani gentleman, it will be back home in Pakistan. And I saw there was a question from somebody in Paris asking whether they can work for the EU in Paris. The answer is you can work for the agencies that are there, and you might be able to work for a while in the EU representations that are there, the Commission and the Parliament, but you're unlikely to be able to maintain a full career as a permanent official in Paris. Hannah, again, I've gone on and on.
Hannah, would you like to, or are you happy with, would you like to add anything further? Otherwise, happy to.
I think on this question, that is everything that can be said.
Okay, absolutely. We have a question from our executive director, Anthony Teasdale, who would like for someone to explain the difference between temporary agents and auxiliary staff.
Yeah, I assume, Anthony, by auxiliary staff, you mean the contractual agents. The long-winded historical explanation is that as part of the reforms in 2004, the institutions, the Commission in particular, decided that there was a lot of work that didn't require the use of highly trained, highly qualified administrators and could be done by another class, as it were, of agent who would therefore have a different sort of contract and specifically would mainly work in the agencies. And therefore, these so-called contractual agents would have a different status. That was the origin. In reality, what happened is that a lot of these contractual agents were doing administrators' work, and that I think has increasingly been the case. And contractual agents became increasingly unionized as well. And so now the trend is really the distinction between contractual agents and permanent officials is fundamentally that a permanent official, as a permanent official, is able to enjoy a career with changes in grades, whereas a contractual agent can enjoy an increase in pay over time to a certain extent, but can't have the same sort of career as a permanent official. But otherwise, quite frequently, there's very little distinction between the work done by a contractual agent and the work done by a permanent official. I'll probably get shot for saying that, but that is the reality. And it's a cause of contention for a lot of contractual agents who resent the fact that they are working just as hard and at just as the same level as permanent officials. In Johannes's book, again, I would say this, wouldn't I? Johannes explains how it is possible now, actually, because of Belgian labour law, apart from anything else, to have what amounts to a permanent temporary contract as a contractual agent or as a temporary agent. And I don't want to start getting into the jargon because it's gobbledygook. But in effect, there are people who serve a complete career within an agency as a contractual agent or a temporary agent.
Thank you. Hannah, would you like to add to that, or you?
I would like to add something to this, yes. I would fully agree on the cast or contract agent contention sometimes in comparison to a fixed AD, administrator staff. It is indeed usually exactly the same, except for it's not a management position that is reserved for administrators. But a lot of people I know my age, I'm 30, are doing a cast position. There are very few, because there were so few competitions over the last 6 years, that have a permanent position, even with internal ones, because in internal concours, usually people are much older and have more experience. So you have more difficulties sometimes at the moment. This is part of an issue, and it's not only the cost. It's also there is contracts that are on weekly or even monthly basis, which gives even less security to yourself and makes life even trickier. But a lot of people still do it because that means you are in and you could learn about an opportunity and move on. And at some point, if you really stick to it, people will. But it's also here the same. These people earn even less, do the same job as a cast or an administrator usually as well, and then there's some friction happening. Everyone's aware of that, so I guess that's also one of the reasons why von der Leyen had this proposal, because this is a major issue. One thing that also is probably quite important to mention here is that you can change between the institutions. Like, you're not stuck in one usually. So also there, if I saw a few questions were on PhD and the JRC, so the Joint Research Center, and that there is indeed at the moment some competition going on specifically for researchers. That definitely is a good entryway. It doesn't mean that if you have an AD position especially, that you need to stick to that. You can change if you notice, okay, this is actually not what works for me. You can manage to find other ways. What I've seen a lot is that people who did the 6 years of cast in the European Parliament or the Commission do not end up getting a possibility to stay. So it's a bit different if you, from what I understand now, this is also new to me, if you do this in an agency than if you do it in one of the big institutions, let's call it. Because if you are at the 6 years there and you do not get a different contract, you do not pass a competition, you do not get whatever deal somehow made something, you will have to leave. And I have a few friends who changed, but because they have a lot of experience in the EU bubble already, they know a lot of people, so they will be able to change if they want to stay in Brussels. But it's also not nice, obviously, that if your work is valued and you have this contract in one institution, you basically move to another same contract that is limited for 6 years again most of the time in a different institution. But there's with the agencies, there's so many agencies, there's so many options, there's agencies all over Europe. So that's also questions I saw. You can get a job. One person asked for France or outside of Brussels or Strasbourg. Yes, there, first of all, main points are Brussels, Strasbourg, and Luxembourg. Luxembourg is usually rather easy to get because no one really wants to go there. In comparison, it's easier than to go get a job in Brussels, from what I hear. But you have a lot of jobs, as was mentioned by Martin, on the worldwide, because we have the representations of the EU, and not only the Commission, but also the Parliament actually has offices and is expanding the amount of offices it has outside the EU. And there are options there. And in every member state, you have at least one agency or one representation by the Commission and or the Parliament together. So there are definitely some, let's say, decentralized options as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could just,
Oh yeah, no, please go ahead.
no, just also the new kid on the block is Frankfurt and the European Central Bank. So it's also now one of the European capitals, if I can put it like that.
And the anti-money laundering authority is going to be there as well, which is recruiting, I think, nearly 800 people. So if you have experience in that field on combating money laundering, have a look.
Or if you have a PhD in economics or microeconomics or something, have a look at the central bank's website. It's fascinating. It sounds almost like a university faculty, the job application procedure.
Mhm. Okay, so that's Frankfurt. Thank you both. We're going to continue with the questions, but there are so many of them that I appreciate the fact that you guys have scanned through them and you're able to sort of weave in and incorporate other questions when you're answering ones. I hope that means that we're going to get to most people's questions. I'm going to sort of group this one. So we have a question about sort of age and work experience. So there was a question from Thomas about someone trying to get in sort of once they already have some work experience in an unrelated field, maybe in their 30s, probably would be too old to enter at the stagiaire. And then would there be a way in for someone with a background like that? And then equally a question sort of about the diversity and sort of the push for greater diversity. There's a question about, is there any sort of consideration given to neurodivergence or any accommodations that are made for candidates with that? Either of you have any comments on either of those topics?
I can start maybe on the neurodivergent question. Yes, this is something you need to let the recruiters know. They will ask for this in the process. You need to provide documents that have proof for this. You can't just say that. But dyslexia and I don't know, autism, things that could cause some disruption because if people don't know about it and cannot accommodate for you, will be taken into account. So this, yes, definitely, you need to have some kind of proof. We are bureaucracies, so some kind of document is always very useful. Age, I've been the youngest in my office for the past 6 years. And we recently hired a trainee who is 29. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but of course I understand that at the age of 30 or older you would not want to do a stage or internship, are looking for something different. Be aware that of course this is difficult as everything a bit, but it is possible as well. So especially if you have some experience already that people think is interesting, you can get hired via not only competitions but also via sending your CV to people directly in the institutions and saying, hey, I work exactly on what you're doing in your unit, so research the unit, know what they're doing. You can find all of that online. It's quite some work, but pitch yourself in the email already. Don't just do that in the attachment. If you're only doing it in an attachment, you're already lost, I would say, because people do not have a lot of time. Make sure that you put the most important things in the email, that you sound nice, and that you show why you would be perfect fit for this topic. And maybe if they don't have anything, they will then see and talk with their people if there's someone else working in that field who could be needing someone with your profile. It happens. It's a bit less straightforward, I would say, but it is a possibility to do it like this. Same, like cabinets or members' offices are very different in recruitment to this more typical bureaucracy. My boss gets in her inbox every day at least one application. I'm managing her inbox together with my colleagues. But I choose which email I delete, which email I reply to myself, and which one I show to my boss. And one of my main criteria is, because it's hundreds of emails every day, is have you looked at her? Are you aware who she is? Who is the person you're applying to do a job with, to work with? If that is clearly not there in the first few sentences, I don't have enough time to read through that usually. And I know most of my colleagues also do not. And then chances that you will get a very standardized no. Or sometimes people will say, please send it again when we are recruiting. We're not recruiting at the moment. Sometimes people say, okay, we'll keep it. But still there, keep an eye out on social media, on websites, on LinkedIn, where these people usually post the notices, and then send an email again, because there's a lot of stuff that happens every day and it might get lost. Maybe the person changes who read your email originally. There's a lot of fluctuation. Me being here for 5 years is actually not super common. I'm by now one of the oldest in years working here. In comparison, a lot of people do something else, go back, change jobs within Brussels. It happens a lot. And which is also one of the downsides, I have to say, of working in Brussels. You make friends, very good friends, and then they suddenly, for whatever reason, go back to their home country. And then, of course, it's a very different relationship than having that person close by. But this, yeah, it's something you unfortunately also get used to.
Johannes, would you like to comment on that, or?
Sorry. No, everything, of course, I agree with everything that Hannah has said. There can be opportunities for older candidates with specific experience in a particular area. Hannah, I think, mentioned health. I remember I had a mature student at Bruges who was a Danish doctor, and she is now in DG Health in the Commission. It's as simple as that. She had a particular skill, and the timing was right. There were a number of questions, indeed, about PhDs. Are PhDs valued or not? The answer is yes, they are. They're not necessarily a game changer on your CV. They can be. It depends. I have got a PhD. It didn't stop me in any way in my career. I'm not sure that it helped me particularly, except that I went to the European University Institute and I wrote a PhD about the European Parliament. And I think the subject was more important and the place where I did it, in a sense, than the fact that I had a PhD. Somebody else asked about sorry, I'm rushing through, Dorian, a few of the questions, the specific questions. Somebody asked about if you go away and do a PhD and then come, how can you get back? Well, Johannes gives several examples of this. The way to get back really is to get back to Brussels in one way or another, not necessarily in the institutions, but working with the institutions and work your way in from there. Somebody asked about, I think, a PhD on artificial intelligence. I would have thought, I mean, it's a growth area, but I would have thought at the moment you're more likely to have success in the JRC than in the Commission itself. But you never know. And it's a good thing to look at the institutions' websites and the agencies, because they can be recruiting specifically for particular profiles. So I know it's quite a lot, actually, if you think about 27 or 37 rather decentralized executive agencies, and then the executive agencies, and then all of the DGs. But it is worth a while to scan them from time to time, because they do put up jobs. And there is one other specific phenomenon which we haven't mentioned so far, and that's joint European enterprises, which are a sort of public-private partnership. They're a growth area as well. They all have, I think there's 6 or 7 of them at the moment. They all have websites. They all recruit directly. And they also recruit specialists with PhDs, scientists of one sort or another. So worth a look there. And then somebody asked, can you still get into a commissioner's cabinet? And the answer is yes. A lot of the time, commissioners' cabinets are composed of, not always, but are composed of people who in one way or another have contacts, not so much with the commissioner, her or himself, but with the person who is in charge of the private office, or the person in the private office who is in charge of the composition of the private office. So the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. Back to you, Dorian.
Thank you. So I'm aware of the time. We're sort of coming towards the end of it. So there was one question that came in actually via email, and I thought that this would sort of be an interesting kind of brief conversation to sort of round it out. It references a comment that Hannah made, where she talked about that one shouldn't feel stuck in a particular place, that there is opportunity to sort of move around to different parts of the EU writ large. The question is, do different EU institutions, Commission, Parliament, Council, do you find that they attract different kinds of personalities and skill sets? And if so, what should applicants be aware of and think about in terms of their institutional fit?
Over to you, Hannah.
That is a very interesting question, I have to say. I think there is a bit of a difference indeed between institutions. However, it does not go that much into detail in the CVs, I would say. It can be beneficial in the parliament that you have experience with what a parliament is, even if you want to work for the administration. So for example, I worked for a national parliament before. So I know how a parliament works in principle. That is definitely something good to do, but it's not required. There's a lot of people there's a lot of different types of staff. I don't know how many different types of positions we have, honestly, nor in the commission, but you have people, we have drivers, we have doctors, we have the typical administrative staff, but among those, the tasks are completely different. You have security people who look at how to make sure that buildings are safe, how to make them energy efficient, how to make sure that there's no discrimination happening to any of the people within the house. You have people taking care of the printing services. You have people taking care of thousands of different things. Like there's a huge variety. It kind of reflects a bit what exists in society to a certain degree, of course, in the job variety, because yeah, as I said, you have a lot of different ones. That's a bit different in the commission, I would say, and in many of the other institutions you don't have that many different services, but you have a lot of different topics still. What my experience is that the commission, for example, is more hierarchical than the parliament. I'm not so familiar with how the Committee of the Regions and the ESC are in this regard. But also for the Committee of the Regions, I have a friend who works there. It helps for her as well to have some experience with regional politicians, like to know what they do, what is work on a regional level, and to combine that. So yes, there is some difference, but none that I would say is that important that it would be a disadvantage for you to apply, because something that is highly valued in all of the institutions is diversity. And you can see that from what I said earlier as well. Don't have the standard CV. Best have something that is a bit different to the standard, and be someone people would like to talk with because you're interesting, or you seem interesting, at least from your CV. And I think everyone here is. Already from the questions, there's a lot of variety of what you have been doing, and I'm sure that everyone could, with a little bit of grit, sometimes maybe get something. that fits them.
Johannes, Martin, the last sort of reflections on this will be for you, and how do you see sort of different personality and skill fits for the Commission, Parliament, Council, and what kind of advice could you give therein?
Well, I'll answer it in a sort of a roundabout way. First of all, I am being immodest now, but I am a good example of how you can move around in the EU. I started in the council, as did Anthony Teasdale, by the way. I worked in various places in the Commission, and I finished my career in an advisory body, the European Economic and Social Committee. For a long time, though, I was working very closely with the European Parliament. I'm an example of the way you can move around. I always moved to where I was interested, basically, and that's something you can do in the institutions. If you're unhappy, you can move, you can shift around. And I think it's a massive advantage. I think that the institutions and the administrations are much more elastic and flexible than national civil services tend to be. So that's a great advantage. And of course, within the European Commission, there's a vast range of policy areas, so you can shift around in that way as well. So, Dorian, I just wanted to whip through a few of the questions that I saw that were on so that everybody gets more or less an answer. So somebody asked about Erasmus Mundus. There's no preferential treatment if you're an Erasmus Mundus student, and there's no discrimination against non-Erasmus Mundus students. It may look nice on your CV, but other matters will also be important. The difference between internal and external open competitions is basically you can only sit in internal competition if you've already got some sort of contract within that institution. So you cannot do it if you're not within the institution. Somebody asked about energy. There is DG Energy in the European Commission, and I would have thought that would be a good entry point for you. But of course, if you can find a consultancy that's working on energy policy or a think tank, that's a way to come to Brussels and to be working close to DG Energy. Somebody asked about a good first position for a traineeship. Well, I think any of the jobs that are going in Brussels that put you in, how can I put it, put you in juxtaposition with the institutions in one way or another would be good. Hannah mentioned there's this, we all speak in jargon and acronyms. She mentioned pluxing, which is slang for Place Luxembourg, where on a Thursday evening everybody gathers. It's a massive networking exercise. And if you have a friend in one of the institutions, maybe you could go along and plux a bit, and who knows what sort of opportunities might open up for you. What sort of reforms is Catherine Day going to introduce? Well, some of them Hannah and I have already mentioned, I think. This business about the contractual agents, the business of recruitment, internal competitions, etc. The others, actually, I'm not certain that I know exactly what's going to come out of this working group. One can only hope that it won't be this sort of cultural clash that happened in 2004 between the Anglo-Saxon model and the continental model, which meant the French model. I think that this time they're going to do things better. Somebody mentioned roadmaps. Johannes talks about narratives, which are effectively the same thing. It does help when you're trying to plot out your career, if you're aware more or less where it is you want to end up. Why do people stop? In my opinion, it's very rare that somebody who's got a permanent position leaves the institutions. It can happen for private reasons. This is something Johannes mentions. For example, if you've got an ailing parent back home and you want to spend more time with them, but you can take compassionate leave, that's possible. Alternatively, I've known of one case of somebody whose child had terrible problems and could only be treated back in a member state. And in the longer run, it made more sense to get a job in the member state in question and to leave. But otherwise, it's fairly rare because, as we've both been stressing, there are so many interesting things to do in the institutions, and you can always move around. And then inside a few tips. Well, Hannah and I have both said this. Think from the recruiter's point of view. Think what it is that will be attractive to the recruiter about you, and try and concentrate on that rather than concentrating on what you think is interesting, subjectively speaking, you think is interesting about yourself? What will interest the person who might want to recruit you? Back to you, Dorian.
Thank you. That was great. A lot, because we had so many questions coming in, and I appreciate sort of you trying to do this very extensive sort of whistle-top tour of the different questions. Hannah, would you like to offer a final word before we sort of wrap it up entirely?
Maybe just one or two sentences. I fully underline also what has been said just now as well. Do not give up. This, at the moment especially, it is a bit more difficult than usually because the competitions are a bit different. But there are always opportunities. Just if you really want to try this out, go for it. And try what the European institutions of all sorts can bring to you. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You have a very valuable experience back to wherever else you want to go. It's something that is highly appreciated by a lot of people, especially on a national level, if you have a European experience. So just, if you're interested, which you clearly are, go for it. And do not give up after the first or the 10th or the 100th non-reply or decline even. If you have the grit, you will find something for sure.
And I remember that was actually a bullet point on one of Johannes's, it was go for it, I believe was one of the last bullet points. So I think it's a great note to end on. I'd like to thank both of the speakers. Thank you so much. I apologize for the strange sort of technical start, but I think we more than made up for it now. And I really appreciate all of the questions from our audience as well. Really a lot of enthusiasm, and we hope to do more skill and career development webinars in future. The next one that we'll be doing will be in the autumn. It will be another policy seminar. It'll be on the future of Europe. So we hope to see many of you back for that. And so just a special thanks once again, Hannah. It's lovely to have you as an alumna and to come and speak about your experience. Martin, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your insight and your sharing your wisdom and much experience with us. So with that, thank you all so much and have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.